Hi guys, it's your girl Couture Shanz and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have a sewing tutorial for you guys, so let's jump right in. The inspo for today is a simple button up top with a standard collar and some short sleeves. I want really statement sleeves and statement buttons, and I'd like to add a side ruching as well as some side slits. Okay, so I picked up this super gorgeous cotton fabric from the fabric store, and I just started by laying my fabric flat on my cutting board and folding it in half. This will be a free-handed garment, as I'm not working with any patterns today. I'm just making note of my body measurements and then marking them on the fabric itself and then get to sewing, guys. So I went ahead and I placed my body measurements on this sticky note or this sticky pad, and I'll just be using it for reference. So this is a customized shirt, and guys, the color is to die for. So I'm a bit out of frame here, but what I started by doing was basically determining the length of my shirt. I wanted it to be about 30 inches long, but then I went ahead and added some extra inches because of the side ruching that I'll be placing there. So that will kind of reduce the final length, and I decided on 30 inches. So I'm just measuring down here about 30 inches on each side, and then I'm going to use my ruler and basically connect these two lines. I'm using blue chalk, but it's not as visible as I'd like, so next time I'll definitely use a brighter color. So I'm just squaring that across to ensure that my line is straight, and I'm doing the same thing at the top. So next I am going to determine the width of my back, and that's usually around 14 to 15 inches. So I'm going to add an extra 1 inch here because I want the shoulder slope to basically fall a little bit off my shoulders. So I'm going to add 2 more inches here, and then I'm adding half an inch seam allowance. Next, I'll be marking the neckline width, and it's usually around 3 to 3.5 inches inclusive of seam allowance. So I'm marking that both vertically and horizontally, and then basically freehanding my neck curve. If you have a French curve, you could go ahead and use it here. I just couldn't be bothered, and as I said, this is a free-handed design, so everything will be mainly done by eye, and certain alterations will be made based on my desired look for this shirt. So I'm just connecting the markings here for my shoulder slope, and I am just marking down about 10 inches, which is my bust point. Then I'm going down again to about 16 inches, which is my waist point, and I am going to square these lines across. So I then took my bust circumference and I divided that by 4. I got about 10 inches inclusive of seam allowance, and I added ½ inch for sewing allowance. So I am going to do the same thing to the bottom of the shirt because I am trying to maximize on the fabric here. So now I'll be moving on to basically constructing my armhole curve. So I'm taking my ruler at my bust point and I'm squaring across, and I'm going to go about 1 to 2 inches above this line. Oh, and I found my French curve, so I'm going to be using it to basically draw in my armhole. This is basically your arm side divided by 2, and mine is about 20 inches. And I divided that by 2, so I got about 10 inches. I decided to basically bring it down a bit because when I measured it was 9.5, so I'm going to add this extra 1 inch afterwards. So earlier I did draw in the front neckline curve, and now I'm going to draw in the back neckline curve, which is about 1 inch below your shoulder line. And just curve that around and add your seam allowance. So now I'm going to take my handy dandy scissors and I'm just cutting along the back neckline curve down the shoulder slope here, and I left about 1/2 inch seam allowance, so you'll see me cutting this. You see me cutting a bit extra, and that's just for seam allowance, guys. So I'm just going down to the bottom and I'm going to cut across. But before I do so, remember I mentioned I wanted to add some extra inches. So I'm going to measure down about 5 inches, making it a total of 35 inches in length. And I'm just adding this, and then I'm going to cut across and then take my back pattern as a reference for my front pattern. So I am going to do this by placing my fabric on the cutting mat and then placing the back pattern which we just drafted on top. I am going to leave about 2 to 2.5 inches at the front, and this will be used for the front band where our buttons and buttonholes will be placed. So I'm just marking that all the way down here and then lining the back pattern up with those markings and then cutting all the way around. So once I am done cutting, I am going to mark out my front neckline and I'm going to go ahead and cut this out on both layers of the fabric. So here you see me placing it to give an idea of how the fabric will be assembled to create our top. Okay, moving on to our sleeves. As I said, this is a free-handed pattern, so everything will just be done by eye. So I'm going to mark down about 13.5 inches on both sides, and this is basically my sleeve length. I did go back in the end and reduce this a bit. I mean, I wanted something dramatic, but not so dramatic. So I'm going to measure on my arm to see how wide I'd like my sleeves, and I got about 16 inches. So I'm just dividing this by 2, which is 8 inches, and I'm adding a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I mark this up at the midpoint of my sleeve, and I'm just going in with my chalk to create the armhole curve. And I'm going to measure this out to ensure that it matches the armhole on my bodice. At this point, it was a bit too wide, so I am reconstructing this curve and I'm going in a bit. Let's measure this and see how much I get. So remember, I'm working with about 9.5 to 10 inches inclusive of seam allowance, and I'm going to make the marking there and then connect it to the bottom of my sleeves. So these are what my sleeves are looking like when open, and I'm just gonna move on to creating my other patterns. So I'm moving on to the color, and here I want my color to be a bit extra as per usual. So I'm going to go ahead and fold my fabric twice this time, and I'm determining the width of my color. Here I arrived at 12.5 inches, which should match the round of your neckline because this is where the collar will be inserted. So the width of my collar is about 22 inches, and I'm just going in by 1 inch to create the slope of the collar, you know, that pointy part there, and I'm just using my ruler to connect these lines. So the height of my collar now, I would want to be about 2 to 2.5 inches, inclusive of seam allowance 3 inches. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark that, I did make full use of my fabric, and my color turned out a bit larger than I wanted, but extra me, just had to work with it because I did want something statement sleeves, statement colors, so why not? And this is what my collar is looking like. I did construct a collar stand, which is what the collar is usually inserted in before being attached to the shirt, but somehow that footage got lost, so we're just going to move on. So now we have all our pattern pieces laid out on my cutting mat, and we are basically ready to move over to the sewing machine. So we have our bodice, we have our sleeves, our collar stand, our collar, and some straps that we'll be using for the side ruching. So for me, one of the most important steps in sewing is pinning. Here I have a small container with most of my pins because trust me, these pins disappear so fast. So I'm starting by taking my bodice, that is the front of your shirt, and we're going to create a fold. As I mentioned, we did leave a 2 to 2.5 inches extra at the front, and this is where I mentioned that our button and buttonholes will be placed. So I'm just going along the front there, and I'm measuring 2 inches. So first it's 1 inch and then you fold, so it's 2 inches in total. So our front fold here will house the button and buttonholes as mentioned numerous times, and this is usually seen at the front of our button-up shirts. So basically, when you have done this long enough, you are able to eyeball it. So you see me eyeballing it here. Don't need to take my measuring tape anymore, and I'm just doing that all the way down the length of the front bodice. And as usual, placing my handy dandy pins, which are my favorite. They're just so cute. So moving over to the sewing machine, we're going to place our fabric under our foot, and we're just going to do a small back stitch, removing our pins as we go along. So we're now going to place a simple straight stitch all the way down the front of our shirt to get that seamless look we all love. Always ensure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end of your stitches, and we're going to just cut off the excess thread here, and this is how it's looking. The next step in the assembly process is basically placing the 2 front pieces onto the back at the shoulder seams. So here you see me pinning at the shoulders, and we're going to ensure that it is lined up correctly at the back and at the sides, and then we're going to take this to the serger and just place a serge to hold this in place. Okay, next we're going to prep our sleeves. Similarly to what we did to the front of our top, we're just going to place a double fold at the bottom of the sleeves to create that nice neat seam. Here you see me measuring 1 inch down, folding once more, and then pinning as usual. And we'll also be using a straight stitch to secure this seam. Next, we're going to take our bodice, that is our front and back pieces which we had sewn together, and we're just going to add our sleeves. So a little trick to basically arrive at the center of our sleeve is to fold it in half and just make a mark at that halfway point. We're then going to place this mark at the shoulders of our shirt and just pin it together. We're then going to pin all the way around the sleeve, so basically inserting the sleeve into the armhole curve, ensuring that it matches perfectly, and then we're going to take this over to the serger again and serge these seams together. And this is how our seams are looking, nice and neat, seamless if I might add. So next we'll be working on our collar and our collar stand. Here you see me basically indicating where we're going to be stitching, and we're going to stitch all the way around, basically 3 sides of our collar, leaving the bottom end open. So I'm just going to place my needle here, back stitch, and I am going to gently continue down the sides of my collar. Here you see me place my needle and basically pivoting, and this provides a seamless stitch at the corners so that they can be easily turned. So you're just going to continue sewing all the way around, leaving the bottom portion open. And don't forget to backstitch when you get to the end of your seams. So next we're going to be snipping the corners of our collar, and this basically helps in the turning over process as well as reducing the bulkiness of our collar. So I'm just snipping it at the edges here, and then I'll be turning it over to basically turn it out to create that point that we see at the end of collars. And as I said, the bulkiness was reduced by removing this excess fabric, and you can give it a simple press and then you'll see how sharp that point is. So I'm then going to place a stay stitch at the top, or basically a top stitch at the top of our collar to hold everything together, pivoting once more, and then using my fingers to basically smooth out the top there to ensure that it aligns well, and then continuing to stitch all the way around, and again we're leaving the bottom open. Next we'll be sandwiching our collar into our collar stand, ensuring that the curved edge is at the top. This is so that when you turn it over, it will look like the standard collar with the curve going downwards. At this point, pinning is of utmost importance as you'll be working with 4 layers in total. So you have to line these layers up perfectly so as to ensure a seamless finish. We're then going to sew all the way around our collar stand, taking our time to gently maneuver the edges and then continuing all the way down. We're then going to turn out the collar stand and take our scissors to push out the edges, basically ensuring that the curve is nice and neat. And as usual, you can give this a press to basically flatten out the seams. We are then going to attach one layer of our collar stand to the top of our shirt, basically attaching it at the neckline using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you're going to place it at the edge and place a pin there for security, and we're just going to pin all the way down before we take it over to the sewing machine. So once we've completed that step, we're going to take the second layer of the collar stand and place a small fold on the inside of our shirt and pin this down. We're basically completing the stand in a seamless manner, so we're going to ensure that our fold is covering the seams that we created earlier. And as usual, we're going to secure this with a straight stitch. Next, we're heading over to our serger and we're going to serge the edges of the sides of the shirt. Because we're going to be placing a channel at the sides, I need both ends to be well secured before we go ahead and place them together. So we're going to place the sides together, starting at the sleeves and the armhole curve, ensuring that you line up these armhole seams perfectly together. And we're going to just place a pin there to hold it down. I'm not going to sew all the way down the side of our shirt because our channel, which is about 10 inches long, as you'll see me measuring here, needs to be left open. So we're just going to place a mark to indicate where we want to stop that straight stitch, and we're going to proceed to stitch it all the way down, stopping at that point. So this is how it will look. And in order to create the channels, we're going to basically fold over this hem here and stitch it all the way up, leaving a 1 inch gap once we reach that point where we marked our 10 inches. So we're gonna sew all the way down using a straight stitch, and this will help to create the channel which we'll use for our drawstring detail. Finally, we're going to hem the bottom of our shirt using the double fold method and a straight stitch on our sewing machine. This top is almost completed and I am loving the results so far. It has a nice clean finish and the color is absolutely amazing, guys. I plan to make a couple more of these shirts in different colors. Oh, and before I forget, we need to create 2 small straps to place into the channels that we created at the side of the top for the drawstring detail. So we're just folding a strip of fabric here and placing a straight stitch all the way down as per usual. And now for the final touches, guys. I found this small bag with some buttons that I had lying around and it was so hard to choose, so I'm just laying them down on the top to see which one would be more suitable. And to be honest, I was loving the oversized vibe, but I didn't want such a dark button, so I decided to go with the light brown, and I think it paired well with the vibrancy of the orange fabric, so I think that was a pretty good choice. I am now going to use the buttonhole function on my sewing machine. As you can see, you have A, B, C, and D, and each indicates the direction of the stitches that will create your buttonhole. Before going ahead and stitching down my buttonholes, I ensure to place some markings on my shirt to indicate where I wanted each buttonhole to start and stop. There are also markings on the buttonhole foot that you can use to guide you. So we've completed our first buttonhole, and we're going to continue down the length of the shirt to place about 5 more. I think I did about 6 in total. I'm then going to use my seam ripper to create the holes by sliding it gently inside the buttonhole guide. Next, we'll be sewing on our buttons, and I took a needle and thread and basically hand sewed these on. So I just took my time to place at least 3 loops in each buttonhole. There are 4 in total, so you go in twice at the bottom and twice at the top, and an extra stitch for security. Once you're done, you're going to go ahead and create a knot underneath your button to basically provide extra stability to ensure that your buttons last as long as possible. So I am now going to take my straps and cut it in half, 1 strap for each side. These measure about 20 inches long and should be able to give enough ruching on each side of the shirt. I'll be using my handy dandy loop turner for this portion of the video, and I simply just slide it through the channels and attach the strap at the end of my loop turner and pull it all the way through. And I did leave a 1/2 inch opening here to place my loop turner through and push it all the way to the top. The top is not secured, so it'll be easy to attach the straps there as well. So once both straps are through, I'm going to go ahead and place a pin on either side just to hold it down a while before I take it to my sewing machine and secure it with a straight stitch. So this is what our side detail is looking like once it's secured, and I went ahead to basically pull on the straps to create the ruching and made a little bow. And I absolutely love this detail. It gives the top a little edge, you know, and just makes it different. Guys, this is the finished look of the shirt on my mannequin, and I absolutely love it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one. Until next time, stay fashionable.